All right. Well, yeah, first off, thank you all for attending and being a part of this panel. It's, something that's been said multiple times is that invasive species don't respect jurisdictions, and we all need to work together to address that common problem. And ultimately, the federal agencies have been so supportive in building capacity, sharing best practices, and ensuring that we're able to take the actions that we need to prepare and ready ourselves for this issue. And we'll lead off with some opening statements from each organization, and then we've got some questions and anticipate taking some questions from the audience as well.
Great, thank you. Tony Norris, Bonneville Power Administration. Some of the things we've heard today from Stacy and Steve and others. Closer, there we are. Those are all risks that BPA has recognized early on, and since 1999, BPA has been funding Pacific States. Just cut out on me. Funding Pacific States to monitor any potential zebra quagga mussel infestations. Yeah, knowing the risk to the hydro system, and also our $23 billion regional investment in salmon. That's also very important to BPA as one of our primary missions as well. So and then since 2017, I think we've also contributed to the watercraft inspection program, and then over time too, we've funded Pacific States through Pacific States to get research done as well. And from now on, I expect BPA to continue funding those efforts.
Jonas Grundman again. Beyond, I think, what I alluded to earlier. So the Corps of Engineers, this is an opening statement. We're a water resource agency on our civil works side. So every single part of aquatic invasive species is going to impact some part of our mission, right? So it's critical for us to be involved at the table, have the right authorities and the right appropriations to get things done. And so I just want to take a moment. I didn't do it earlier, but to thank not only Penwar and Pacific States Marine Fishery for being such great partners, but everybody here that helped kind of get us at the table and moving forward and doing good work.
Well, you can use any of these. All right, well, sure. I'm Theresa Thom, and I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm our Regional Aquatic Invasive Species Coordinator for the Pacific region, which includes Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Hawaii, and the Pacific Islands. And for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're a conservation organization, but the really key part of our mission is working with others. That's the very beginning of our mission. And so we acknowledge in the mission of our agency that we cannot do this work alone. And we're a pretty diverse organization as a land management agency. We protect marine, freshwater, and terrestrial lands across the nation. We manage and protect and try to recover almost 2,500 species across the United States, and we're a small team. We have about 8,000 employees across the U.S. And so, the key messaging, we know that there is incredible amount to lose because of invasive species for all aspects of our mission. And, as we've heard today, many times, all the different ways that we lose because of invasive species and aquatic invasive species. And so that's a key part of our work has been prevention and continues to be preventing the introduction of these invasive species coming into the United States, as well as trying to prevent the movement and spread focused on pathways and interventions, risk management of pathways. And then we're a science agency, so we include scientific information and the best science in all of our management decisions. And so we really do. We try to focus on developing the science for our lands and good management, but also funding research. And we're an important partner as far as funding a lot of the work that's going on, including outreach and education.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Munn with NOAA Fisheries. I'm the acting assistant regional administrator for the Interior Columbia Basin Office. So that's Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, and Idaho. Like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we're both a science and a regulatory agency. And I'm going to talk about the science side first. There's a lot of work that's been done, but there's a lot that we need to know, especially as we apply managing for or preventing quagga mussels from establishing in the Columbia Basin. And one area is treatment methodologies. We really haven't looked at them for the species and the ecosystems that we have in the Pacific Northwest. And that needs to be done. And you see the research that's being done in the Great Lakes that's looking at ionized copper, and we see the research on chelated copper, and there's reasons why they were able to use those compounds in those environments. And there's going to be environments here, there's going to be habitats here where we won't be able to use it. And so what's our best treatment methods? Potash and a few other things, some bacteria. There's some research, but it hasn't really advanced in 20 years. And we need to move it along. And we need help advocating for funding for that research arm. And then adding on to what this gentleman in the front here said earlier about understanding how ecosystems are going to be impacted. Again, that science hasn't been advanced in 20 years. So looking at different treatment methodologies, what are the scientific risks, consequences of treatment and not treatment to all aspects of ecosystems? How are they going to respond if you don't treat? We really don't know. We're guessing at this point. And I think there are people out there who understand ecosystems enough, who have life cycle models, that you can model this and you can put some thought to it, but we need some money to be able to do that. And we also need some attention and direction to be able to prioritize that in terms of research money. From the regulatory side, I know there's some interest in how we would manage that. We've been in discussions for many years with the Army Corps of Engineers about Section 7 consultations for the Endangered Species Act impacts of a response plan. We've participated since the early 2000s on response plan development, and we'll continue that. Just talking to Stephen, we're going to review the latest modifications or amendments to the response plan and participate in that. And apply what we learn from the Idaho example and other examples across the country about ways to better respond to minimize impacts to other parts of the ecosystem. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Heidi McMaster, go ahead.
I'm the IPM and Invasive Species Coordinator for Reclamation. So I cover our policy office for the 17 Western states. And part of our mission, much like Jonas said, is water and power. And as such, we are beholden to protect and monitor our assets. That includes tribal trust resources. We partner with Fish and Wildlife Service for fisheries, our fish hatcheries for mitigation, and all of these are critical to be able to monitor for. So one of the things that we do is active monitoring. We have multiple crews throughout the West that do mostly mussels monitoring. We have a technical lab in Denver that does eDNA development and monitoring. And we've been working closely with California and even international on the new golden mussel issues. So we've been expanding our research, much like was mentioned before. Technology needs to advance and be improved. So we have active research grants going on to develop new methods of control and application. We're expanding our partnerships, working more closely with states and federal partners to look at gaps and overlaps and where we can best utilize resources. Reclamation has an active funding opportunity, and we're a small agency, but we do work hard to try to get the resources out there to people on the ground that do help and manage a lot of our resources for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Appreciate that. Well, let's lead off with the first question. And, I think this plays really well with what we heard from the tribal panel, as well as how can organizations partner with federal organizations to address this issue? Maybe take that one.
Right now, BPA's partnership is with specific states, and we expect that to continue. The funds are currently only coming from the power side of the BPA and not included in the Fish and Wildlife budgets. Those funds are prioritized by the Power Planning Council and others in the region. So, but BPA's power side, it's the risk is considerable. So any potential additional projects would, usually flow through Pacific states.
Yeah, I think to build on some of the things that were mentioned on previous panels, like this is one excellent example of how we partner, right? We get together, we share ideas, we talk about research needs, how to get things done, how we can put the puzzle pieces together to have an overall effective effort. So, just informally, these kind of things are a great way to do this. Specifically with the Corps of Engineers, we have a variety of authorities. Obviously, the cost share program that is through the Aquatic Plant Control program that I help implement. But we have at the local project office level on our own lands, we certainly have opportunities through our other authorities to partner with, adjacent agencies, organizations, nonprofits, and whoever it might be to help execute or develop ideas. So we've got a robust research program through our engineering research labs that, we can take ideas that, are generated here and hopefully ship them off to our ERDIC lab to start the raw development of. So, there's all kinds of pathways.
And similarly, for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there's many ways to partner with us. We actually co-manage several of our national fish hatcheries with tribal partners here in the Pacific Northwest and one of our national wildlife refuges as well. So there's direct partnership with our tribal partners. Also funding, we have a Quagga Zebra Mussel Action Plan funding about $4 million that notice of funding is sent out annually for high priority projects as outlined in the Quagga Zebra Mussel Action Plan. We have an existing memorandum of understanding with multiple federal agencies. So not only are we partnering with states and tribes, but we partner with our other federal agencies. That MOU is with the USDA Forest Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, and several different bureaus within the Department of the Interior. And then, there's other types of funding. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provides state grants to our states to implement their invasive species management plans. And that is done mainly through the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, which is co-chaired by both the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA. And that is a really important group there's 13 federal agencies and 13 ex officio members. And that's really a fantastic forum for work on aquatic invasive species. And that the regional part of the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force is our Western Regional Panel. And many of you in the room are familiar with that group, but that's another existing forum and an amazing way to connect with, all of us trying to be more consistent on rapid response and preparedness for invasive species. And then I guess I would just, again, highlight another way to partner with not just the Fish and Wildlife Service, but multiple agencies is with the work right now on having a nationally coordinated early detection rapid response plan or network. And so USGS has been really engaged on this, as well as the Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as many other agencies. But a big piece of that is once if in the event that prevention is not possible and we do have an introduction or a detection of invasive species, having the plan in place of making sure we're able to rapidly respond, that we have the techniques and tools to actually monitor for these species, to be able to do early detection. But even before that, doing horizon scanning. So trying to think about what other species may be coming to our region that we aren't even aware of yet, that's not even part of our conversation yet. So being able to know what to look for, how to look for it, and then doing things like hotspot analysis, looking at risk of introduction. So knowing where we need to look for those things, and then getting into the rapid response and the communication. So that's another way to plug into that. And we've been lucky over the last couple of years to be actually have funding to do a lot of this work.
So NOAA Fisheries is a much smaller agency than any of these three, and we do not have funding available for this program. Where we engage is with prioritizing staff time. And we don't have a regional AIS coordinator, for example, but we do have folks that we staff that are specializing in invasive species and do participate in meetings. Somebody, Ben Matabag of our staff, participated in a meeting with the Corps and Walla Walla a few weeks ago, and we've engaged with Pacific states. That's been our regional forum for engagement.
Thank you so much. Heidi?
So I would, Theresa and Jonas both mentioned quite a bit of the engagement that we currently do as well. I second the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force and the Western Regional Panel as excellent resources to plug into opportunities. A lot of things are shared across those listservs, and that includes funding opportunities. We actively have grants with state programs and tribes for funding of watercraft inspection. That's where a lot of our partnership goes. We're pretty small when it comes to our resources, but each of our 5 regions has an aquatic invasive species or invasive species coordinator. And I know within the regions that I've worked in, we actively work with our states. We participate in the state invasive species council meetings and try to keep that engagement. Like, we're here to help, and wherever we can, we'd like to be able to help. So being able to get those contacts, those local regional contacts, we sometimes at our level, we don't understand or don't know who to talk to at the different agencies. So being able to get all that information so that we can share with you is very valuable. So if you don't know who your point of contact is, that's something that we can help with, and we can try to connect where those partnerships can happen on the ground.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Next question before we go to the audience. Briefly, what's your organization's role in permitting and compliance around response actions like a rapid response treatment?
Yeah, that's not BPA's thing.
For the Corps of Engineers, right? So in our program setup, we're going through NEPA and a lot of those compliance efforts ahead of time to try and get a program on the ground. When we get to specific rapid response actions, that's where it gets a lot more complicated. So our role really becomes helping navigate that process for the expenditure of federal funds with the services and with other entities as we go to execute, usually through probably an emergency or alternative NEPA procedure. After the fact, if something gets done. Looking ahead, trying to find ways to maybe look at rapid response programmatically to start getting the tools pre-approved so that we can execute faster on the ground. That's where we're at. Which one do you prefer? Because I'll click
I'm in the middle.
Okay.
I can use them both. So for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, an important part of our regulatory role is focused on the Endangered Species Act. And so, we serve in that role of protecting and recovering almost 2,500 species across the United States. And so that's, a key part of our work is making sure that federal actions don't impact our threatened and endangered species. So so far in rapid response, we have looked at emergency consultation as a process to go through, assessing the impact to T&E species, but in trying to mitigate the risk to those species prior to an emergency action.
So similar to what Theresa was saying, we do Section 7, ESA Section 7 consultations for Endangered Species Act listed species, salmon and steelhead. Also, we do Magnuson-Stevens Act Essential Fish Habitat consultations for Pacific salmon. We do those for any federal action. A federal action is something that's been funded, permitted, approved of by another federal agency. So typically in this case, it's with the Corps. It could be with the Bureau of Reclamation or another federal agency. We've been in discussions, as I said, with the Corps about programmatic approaches to consultation since the 2017-18. We haven't landed on a spot yet, but obviously in the last year or two, the urgency has increased, and we've elevated those discussions.
Thank you. Heidi?
We have been active with NEPA to a much smaller degree. Our Section 7 consultations must happen, but most of our work is funded through partners. We give money to our partners for that because we don't have the active resources. But if it is federally funded, we do have the requirement to do our due diligence. There's active work being done for categorical exclusions, which would expedite NEPA processes. But when it comes down to it, we're working also on programmatic level NEPA, where we might be able to do a lot of the analysis early on, so we can then tailor to that and speed up the process. But that work is still in its infancy stage, and discussions are happening. But it, like was mentioned, in the last year or two, it's becoming more and more important to get these things done earlier rather than later.
So are there any questions from the audience? We have a few more minutes. Blaine?
Question, we've heard there's an ongoing process for emergency consultation. So throwing out a scenario, if mussels were discovered in anadromous waters next summer, what would the agencies, specifically the Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA /NIMS, what would you guys anticipate the turnaround time if there was an action that was proposed? Say it's in a boat harbor. What are we looking at for turnaround time to be able to effectively go in and do some control measures?
Well, if the state of emergency is called, so that's it's threatening life or property. We don't do a biological assessment and biological opinion process. It's a wholly different process than regular consultation. So what it looks like is the response federal agency would give us a call and say, what advice do you have for us? What species are there? How do we protect them? What's the best way to protect them? And we would talk about various best management practices to be put in place, and then you would proceed.
Okay.
There's a process to actually document that after the fact, and we would respond with a biological opinion, but we do not give take, if that means anything to anybody. We do not give take after the fact. So that's not part of the emergency consultation process. So what we have advocated up to, we've gone back and forth, but we've advocating using emergency processes for this, using the Pacific States Manual as the basis for a response action. So if you respond to an outbreak consistent with the manual, the ESA manual, then that would streamline your emergency consultation greatly. So there would be no holdup in response.
Okay.
If that's your question.
That's a basic question. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you agree? Yeah.
You mentioned reviewing response plans, and we heard from Megan. She's working on a response plan that's site specific up in the city of Bellingham. We're working on one too on the Washington side of the Snake. Curious if there's capacity to review site specific response plans, or if that would benefit us to have formal review of those types of plans. Like, would it expedite response if we had a review?
Just thinking aloud, if every jurisdiction came in with their own response plan, obviously we couldn't do it. So I think maybe there should be a way that we could do it in a streamlined manner. Is your plan consistent with Pacific states? What's different about it? Bring it to us. Certainly a statewide plan would be more relevant and have a higher priority than a city plan. That's not to say that a city plan couldn't have a quick review. But there wouldn't be an approval process for the Pacific states. Actually Barry signed it for us back when he was our regional administrator. So we've signed off on response plans, but it's not a regulatory sign off.
Yeah, and I would just add, making sure that it's in line with the different state management plans and response plans too. That's super helpful.
Nancy mentioned that you need help advocating for treatment methodologies and scientific risk ecosystem-wide research. Jonas mentioned that there's extra money in that account. What do you guys think about what's the best path for us to get this done? Anybody can answer that.
Yeah, just get it done. I don't know. I don't know if I have a great answer for that one. I'm not a NEPA practitioner or an ESA practitioner. So when we get into the specifics of how those things need to work, I'm a little out of my element. I would say getting it done. I think we have potential funding sources at the federal level that we could leverage to start that work. Certainly would need to reach across and partner with the services to update. I don't know if we're talking about an update to the current Pacific States manual or doing raw research on new chemicals. Obviously that falls squarely in the Corps of Engineers research wheelhouse. If we're talking about new tools to utilize and their effectiveness, that's easy for us. As far as the consult side, I'd probably lean on you guys on the best pathways forward.
Well, I don't think we're talking about research on consultation wise. I think it's just the pure science. And as federal agencies, we can't lobby obviously for funding. So folks that can lobby for funding or talk about priorities to administrations, that's very helpful. It's not us.
PNNO.
What?
So there is the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, has helped with some of the research on non-target impacts of like potash on salmonids, and there's been a couple products that were done with research related to that. So USGS also has some funding specific to tied to coordinating with both U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and USGS to do this exact work, which potentially could be leveraged with our other federal agencies. There's definitely a path forward to do that.
Let's give our panelists a hand. Thank you so much for being here.